quite unfit for work. And Shackleton gave him a biscuit. Not this one, because it's not eaten, but one like it, made by Huntley and Palmer. And Wilde later wrote, "I don't suppose anyone else in the world can thoroughly realise how much generosity was shown by this. Thousands of pounds would not have bought that biscuit." As they returned, they got awful dysentery, diarrhea, probably not properly cooked pony meat, and it was said later that our food lies ahead and death stalks us from behind. Marshall then, who was very rather critical of Shackleton in many cases, he fell ill, and the other two, the old dogs, Shackleton and Wilde, had to go on back to Hut Point to get help. Shackleton was 100 hours on the go to get help for Marshall, with Adams looking after him. This is Shackleton and Wilde coming to be picked up by the Nimrod, and they got back then to the ship, all four, on the 1st of March, and they had a big feed of bacon and fried bread. So they travelled 1,600 geographical miles, 366 miles further south than Scott and Wilson and Shackleton. That's a photograph I rather like of Shackleton in Pullover. Further south, and of course Stanford's produced a map which showed Shackleton's further south with no competition at this stage, 1909. Here's Shackleton on the way back. Looks like he's eating a hamburger, but no. He went back on a separate ship, not the Nimrod, and was sailing home on the India, ship called India. A lady remembers in the dining saloon, his table was a constant uproar from his Irish wit and inexhaustible supply of funny stories. Well, I can't say that echoes what I'm like, but anyway, I do my best. He did leave behind Whisky, which has caught a lot of publicity recently, McKinley's Whisky, made by McKinley, and this was conserved, but in doing so, they removed a couple of bottles and made exact replica. It was flown back by the present owner of the company, White Mackay, who took over McKinley's, and it's flown in a private jet back to Scotland, and a specialist whisky man made up a replica, and they have nice bottles, wonderful memorial memory of this expedition. But curious enough, it has endurance written here. Why? Because Shackleton had wanted to call the Nimrod the Endurance, but he had another go later. And it's very nicely boxed. Wonderful. There's Mawson with Shackleton. And the funds finally came in. The Prime Minister Asquith, whose family motto was wait and see, gave Shackleton 20,000. And Shackleton actually did sign off on that one. And here you see then lectured all over the place to get more funds. Here we are, ironically, the advertising people are called Scott. And this is Shackleton talking about his trip. He visited the great and the good. Here is Balfour, previous Prime Minister of Britain, who had the distinction of being the first Prime Minister to go in a motor car to collect his seal of office from the King. He also, his grandfather was the Duke of Wellington, who was born, as you know where, in Ireland. His uncle got him a job in Ireland as Chief Secretary. And his uncle was called Robert Salisbury. And I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, Bob's your uncle, but that's what it originates from, apparently. He didn't marry, and Lord Beaverbrook, who was a slightly sharp-tongued newspaper baron, said that actually Balfour was a hermaphrodite, but no one had ever seen him naked. He went back to his old school, Dulwich College, where he'd been after they left Ireland, and to the prize giving, and he said that's as close as I've ever got to a school prize. He produced the lovely book produced, The Heart of the Antarctic, and I have a first edition, which very happily for me is signed by Ernest Shackleton when he came to Dublin on December the 14th, 1909. And here's a card which his sister sent to my aunts to come and go and listen to your man talking. I also have one of his sledges, which I obtained from New Zealand, quite by chance, and that's on display in a museum close to where he's born in Ireland, Versailles. What happened to some of the other people? I just mentioned two of them, Mackay and Murray, both went to the Arctic with Stephenson and lost their lives, a rather turbulent expedition. And just to finish up, although the Dublin Evening Telegraph on the 24th of March said, unprecedented triumph, South Pole almost reached by an Irishman, so other people, not so full of praise, Markham got in and said, I can't quite accept the latitudes, I don't believe it. His attempt to reach the pole was a failure, because of all the energy and cleverness, he doesn't possess the special qualities which go to make a successful commander. He also said here, in writing up, Markham wrote notes about everybody, and he published some of them, but this one he didn't publish. And he talking about Shackleton, said, son of a doctor, whatever, but Irish. And various other comments which you won't be able to read from a distance and more than I can read from here, but it's actually very rather damning about Shackleton, and says he had no scientific qualifications when he went with Scott, but he was taken out only out of kindness and partly owing to his importunity. When he went on Scott's southern expedition, he broke down and endangered the lives of others. Returning, he proved himself to be a colossal swollen head and ungrateful cad. Maybe closer to the bone, Marshall went with him to the further south. Marshall, who was probably getting rather old and grumpy in 1956, said, and I think he was just envious or something, he said, I've no opinion of Shackleton other than as an opportunist and a mountebank. He's an outstanding, plausible rogue. He should have died in the Beermore Glacier unless I'd taken over after he proved his incompetence. So you never know what people say when they're under a bit of pressure. Shackleton then went to America. He was loved there, and he was, of course, a great speaker, and he never said, I did this, I did that. It was always we, and that endeared him to the American people. Here he is in Canada, and this is in Longgarth, 99 George Street in Toronto, if you know there. That's Shackleton relaxing with a fag, which is probably his final downfall. He travelled to America on Lusitania, and I just end up with a red herring. This is the last photograph of the Lusitania. And at the beginning of the First World War, my grandfather, who'd had a nice motor yacht built for himself, was asked to lend it to the Admiralty, British Admiralty, to be a ship's tender and things. Anyway, it was stationed in Cork, in Baltimore and Cork. And they dressed it up in grey and put a number on it. And in the 7th of May 1915, it was off the old Helican sail, and my grandfather wasn't on board, but he knew people on board. He handed it over down the River Shannon, and they saw a rock moving, and then it disappeared, and then it come up again, and it wasn't on the map, and the rock was Unterseeboot 20, and this was a U-boat waiting off the southwest coast of Ireland to sink the Lusitania, which it did about 4 hours later. So they chased our boat, which apparently behaved in a very patriotic manner, whatever way you want to take that. And one of the seamen on board our boat fired a few shots, but anyway, they didn't waste a torpedo. So now the boat is now 103 years old, and we still use it. So if you do come to County Cavan, I can't promise a ride on this boat, but anyway, I like the idea. It was built in 1911 because that was sort of historic year for polar exploration. So I'll stop there. Sorry, I've gone on a bit